Store policy. This was years ago. I am talking 20,042,005. I am not complaining here. Simply pointing out an event I personally found funny. We had a new manager take over our grocery store that I worked at. He wanted us to follow the policy book to the letter, and I mean to the letter. A tad bit unrealistic. But he was super polite about it and said he was just trying to protect everyone's jobs. I thought this was nice of him, but at the same time, several of us tried to point out that some of the policies needed revision. One of the things in the policy book was we were to card everyone who wanted cigarettes or alcohol. It did not matter if it was extremely obvious that they are of age. It said in the policy book to card everyone, including any people with the person paying. If there were little kids, then this was of course an exception. They can't possibly have ID. So all the employees started complying with this policy. There were grumbles by customers, but we were just doing our job. The customers seemed to understand, but would let the manager know how ridiculous they felt the policy was when it was extremely obvious as to who was old enough to purchase tobacco and alcohol without needing to card. But policy was policy after all. Well, one day I was working and I had a woman come into my line with a couple bottles of wine, and who was with her? The store manager. Off the clock. It was him and his wife. Now let's remember, store policy is to card everyone. No exceptions aside from little kids. So what do? I ask for both of them to provide ID. My boss looks at me and says, "Isn't it obvious we are of age? I am your boss as well. Certainly you don't need to card us." I smiled and kindly reminded him what the store policy was, and pointed out it was in the policy book that cashiers are required to card everyone, no matter if they were obviously of age. I also reminded him how he told all employees this was to be strictly enforced to protect our jobs. He just stares at me blankly. It's like he can't believe I am following exactly what he said to do. His wife had already handed me her ID and looks at him and says, "Well, where is your ID? If it's store policy, then it's store policy." It wasn't long after that he contacted corporate to ask that the policy be revised. A few weeks later, we are handed a new policy book, and the new policy on cigarette and alcohol sales was to card if the purchaser looked under 40 years of age. Again, I am not complaining here. I just thought this situation was funny. How dare you do what I told you to do? Quote. The next time they come through, no ID needed this time. You are both obviously over 40. If there were little kids, then this was of course an exception. They can't possibly have ID. So little kids could buy alcohol and cigs without showing a card? Very progressive of the store. Back when I was a young teen in the 70s, my father would send me into a store to buy cigs for him. He gave me the money while he waited in the car because he didn't want to look for a parking space on the street. When it's the boss is when you need to be even more strict enforcing rules. Some bosses will fire you if you make an exception for them, trying to test you. And what's the point of carding everyone? What would you do if the buyer was 30 and were with someone that was 19? Okay, you card them both. Do you not sell to 30/19ths, but do sell to 38ths? This is a delightful story. I love that his wife got in on it, too. I was denied a 6-pack of beer once because my 15-year-old son was with me. Even when I pointed out to them that he was my child and I was an adult buying beverages for myself, they still denied the sale. I understand having these types of policies and needing to cooperate with the law. But you're right. Sometimes they just go too far. I am not completely up to date on the laws surrounding alcohol sales in New York State. However, it seems so ridiculous that a parent cannot purchase alcohol with their child being present. If someone was purchasing alcohol for a minor, wouldn't that be the responsibility of the adult purchasing for the minor? The person who is actually breaking the law. I mean, a store cannot be responsible for selling alcohol to an adult who then turns around and gives it to a minor, right? Yay for the wife. Not worked retail where I handled alc sales. But I heard a story from a former coworker. Their DM would come in maybe once a month at random times and refuse to show ID, to test CSRs and ensure they were insisting. In my state you have to card regardless. Even the little old obviously 90-year-old lady on a walker. The one CSR who didn't card the DM was immediately terminated. The wife was super cool. And that sounds overall like a good manager who just didn't realize quite how silly it was. That's an awesome story. Seeing as my wife still looks like she's in her 20s, being mid-40s, she would still be flattered by this policy. If only she drank. The other side of the coin here would be if you had failed to card the boss and his wife. Then you were technically in violation of policy and could be written up or worse. Good on you for making it stick. Ah yes, it's not inconvenient until it's inconvenient for me. Rules for thee, but not for me, are the worst types of managers. Maintains eye contact while typing in the DOB to establish dominance. The repercussions of not asking are very high in some states. Years ago, I carded every single person as a CYA tactic. The crummy job wasn't worth possible years in prison and a hefty fine. Where I live it's the law to card everyone and has been for years. No guessing ages. This takes some pressure off the cashiers and can keep the store out of trouble. The penalties for the store for selling alcohol to underage people is strictly enforced and the store can and will lose their liquor license for violations. I'm over 70 and have no problem presenting my ID to the cashier. Seems like no one else does either. Once again, the consequences of one's actions. If you're going to tell people to follow rules, you need to know what those rules are. I have always felt that any boss, manager who comes up with some policy needs to be put in some time on the front lines to see how that policy works. You did exactly what you should have done.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.